Well, a consequential mayoral race is heating up in New York City. Chances are, unless you're living under a rock, you've heard about it. The three major candidates took part in a second debate last night. It's a race to keep up with this guy. He is the frontrunner by quite a pace, self-described Democratic socialist Zoran Mamdani. Former Governor Andrew Cuomo and Republican candidate Curtis Sliwa lag behind in those polling numbers. President Trump has called Mamdani a communist, saying that his potential win is, quote, a terrible thing for our country, close quote. Well, New York business leaders and some major investors echo that very same sentiment of the president. Mamdani's platform includes increasing the corporate tax rate, higher taxes on the rich, and a free bus system. So a lot to break apart here. Brian Lehrer, he's the host of the Brian Lehrer Show on WNYC Radio, live in New York City with us today. Thank you so much for joining us, Brian. So what's your takeaway from last night's debate? I'm particularly fascinated because really this could be a test as to how much traction a so-called democratic socialist could have, not only in New York City, but in the rest of the United States.
Right. Well, the test for Mamdani last night was fending off attacks from both Andrew Cuomo, the former governor, who resigned amid a sexual harassment scandal in 2021, and Curtis Sliwa, the Republican nominee, who's well known in New York and a bit around the country as the founder of the Guardian Angels. And they were both going after Mamdani to some degree along the lines of what you were just laying out. But the fact that Sliwa affirmed yesterday that he is staying in the race works very much to Mamdani's advantage. There's been a lot of pressure on Sliwa from a lot of his fellow Republicans, frankly, to drop out. So it becomes a one-on-one against Cuomo. Mamdani's been leading in the polls. Last poll had him up by about 14 points or so over Cuomo, much closer if Sliwa drops out. But Sliwa is staying in, and he was throwing his barbs in both directions last night. He was hitting Cuomo for this and that. He was hitting Mamdani for other things. And that may be the biggest news of the last day, maybe more even than whatever happened on stage in the debate.
Right. And, you know, as a national theme plays out relative to immigration raids, we know recent reporting about the raid on the famous Canal Street area in New York came up in that debate. How can that, as a national conversation, sort of be looked at through the context of a New York conversation? What do the candidates have to say about what played out on Canal Street by the feds?
Well, interestingly, I think that's not going to become much of an issue in the race. It's certainly an issue in the city, an issue between the city and the Trump administration. But all three candidates rejected that ICE raid without the participation of the NYPD, or doing that instead of the NYPD. Canal Street is a place where a number of people presumed to be undocumented immigrants have been selling counterfeit stuff. And so it's street vendors. You know, it's not like they were committing violent crimes out there when that raid happened. Now, ICE says that the people who they detained, who they have kept in custody after their initial detention of people, are those who have other more serious violent convictions or wanted for violent things on their records. We'll see if that turns out to be true, but that's who they say they detained. But in terms of what the initial raid was to the normal New Yorker walking down the street, it was street vendors and somewhat chaotic, and people say there's drug dealing around down there, but it did not look like violent crime in progress. So all three mayoral candidates, including the Republican Curtis Sliwa, said, no, that is not the place of ICE. That is the place of the NYPD. So I think whatever issue there is between the city and the Trump administration, it doesn't really break out between the candidates.
Okay, so another question I have, and that's, of course, Mayor Eric Adams putting his weight, his political weight and endorsement behind Mr. Cuomo. Do you think that perhaps could provide a wedge that may get Mr. Sliwa to consider doing what a lot of people have asked him to do, which is drop out to help Cuomo?
I don't know if that would be the thing. I don't want to ever predict what somebody's going to do in politics because they can always change their minds. You know, just recently, when Eric Adams was still a candidate in the race, running for re-election, he called Cuomo a snake and someone who has pushed Black candidates out of elections before, and Adams is black. So that's a pretty serious charge and a pretty serious insult, Snake, to level at Cuomo and then turn around and endorse him. But we know that kind of thing is actually not that unusual in politics. You know, somebody is never dropping out until they do. So you don't know what's really going to happen with Sliwa. But there was a dramatic on the air moment with Curtis Sliwa yesterday. You know, he's largely been making his living as a conservative radio talk show host in New York. He's on leave to run for mayor, but he went on as a guest on his station and announced that he will never come back to that radio station to work there another day in his life because hosts there and the owner there have been urging him to drop out of the race. So he was so defiant regarding staying in the race that he even publicly quit the radio show from the station that he's been hosting on and off for about 30 years. So it would really be a turnaround at this point for Sliwa to drop out, though I'll say again, you never know.
Brian Lehrer, who has the ear of millions of New Yorkers every day. Nice to have you here on our national broadcast, CBS News 24/7. We'll be watching.
Thank you for having me.